So, Anthony, tell me how you know today's guest.
Well, today's guest is a local tattoo artist here in the Northern California area. And he actually did a tattoo for me, did a chest piece for me about 2 years ago. So that's how we ended up getting connected. And he's an incredible artist. And he also works with the veteran community as well as first responders. And I wanted to be able to tell a story. So I asked him if he'd sit down with us and share. And he was gracious enough to do it. It was a really good conversation.
So you got the tattoo obviously before we were ever doing the podcast. So how did you come across him at that time?
So I had looked at a couple of different tattoo artists and I looked at his work. So I remember walking in and saying, hey, I have this idea. And he took that idea and he turned it into an awesome tattoo. He's a fantastic artist who spent his time going through it, made sure that I was good with everything, all of the different pieces to it. And I couldn't be happier with him. And then that turned into an interview. And tell us your story.
I love that. Yeah. 2 years later, full circle. Really cool. We talk all the time about the people you know and the doors that open and all of that. Who would have thought 2 years later, hosting a podcast that talks about local businesses. So I was excited as soon as you brought it to me, and it was a good conversation. So looking forward to our listeners hearing it.
Yeah, I am too. And we got to go down and sit in his tattoo shop. We got to take a tour, and that's where we actually did the interview. And you were supposed to get a tattoo that day.
Oh, I was just going to say, we got tattoos, make everyone think that we did. No, no, we did. I thought about it, but no tattoos this time. Welcome to Tell Us Your Story, the podcast that tells the diverse stories of businesses, leaders, and influencers throughout Northern California. Our mission is to ignite inspiration, foster education, and bring our community together. Join us as we unravel the path to achievement, discovering how these remarkable businesses and leaders navigated obstacles, conquered hardships, and transformed failures into success.
In today's episode, we had a great conversation with Sonny Batten of Kinetic Ink. And there was a lot to be learned. The conversation went down a couple of different rabbit holes. I had a lot of fun with it. But one of them is really talking about the tattoo world. And he jumps in, he dives into all of the fundamental questions that you'd want to ask, but also he talks about, the women, the money, the fame, everything that we all think is going on in the tattoo world. He'll touch onto that. Another piece was his mentor. He was an apprentice for, I think it was 3.5 years. And it was not a good experience. There was not only just outright mental abuse, but they would fight in the tattoo shop, which I just found just bizarre from the world that I live in the corporate world. So a couple great stories there. And then by far what I think is the most important is the impact that he's having and how he gives back to the veterans and the first responders. And it's Sonny, along with the organization Kinetic Ink. He talks through why that is so important to him, as well as the tattoo shop, and then the organization that they work with to give money back for every tattoo that is done. So I think everybody is really going to enjoy the conversation that we had and the story that's being told. So stay motivated, stay inspired, sit back and enjoy this episode of Tell Us Your Story.
I was born and I grew up most of my life in Indiana, in a little small town in central Indiana. It's called Hartford City. It's about 30 minutes from Muncie, which would be the biggest city that it's around, the closest. There's a college there called Ball State. Some people are familiar with it, but most people are familiar with Ball State or Muncie. If you talk about Indiana, you tell them Hartford City, they're like, huh? It's podunk.
And how many siblings did you have? Mom and dad?
I had a mom and dad, and two brothers. So, and my parents were together until I was 17. I believe it was the middle of my junior year. They split up, I think. So my senior year, I kind of stayed with my dad and had a buddy. Life was very, very strange when you're 17 years old and everything just falls apart.
Well, I'll come back to that. So when you're in your younger years, the three brothers, mom and dad, was it a stable household? happy family when you think back to the youth?
Yeah, it was a stable household. Parents weren't drug addicts or alcoholics. Lots of love.
What'd they do
that
for a
I can
living?
remember. My mom, she was pretty much a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked at like factory jobs. He drove a crane for a little while, like a roofing company crane, nothing like super big, but one of those truck cranes that you drive around. We never really had a lot of money, so that was one thing that was always talked about was love. That my parents would always, well, especially my mom, they would always be like, money's the root of all evil. And then I grew up thinking that, and how wrong that statement is, like money is by far not the root of all evil. The things that some people do and the things that some people use money for obviously is, but there are a lot of good things that can come from money. And I believe that a lot of things is perspective. Somebody can see something one way and somebody can see something another way. I read this book. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah. It's a good book.
It completely puts it in perspective. Like if you are taught something your entire life, and that's all you really know, then that's kind of your outlook. That's kind of who you are. And it
shapes who you're going to be.
It does. And it's very disheartening for me to be in my 40s now, and be looking back like, wow, like what a different life I would have, even not having money, right? Yeah. But what a different life I would have had, had the message been a little bit different, And
so what was it like when you were going through, let's go through middle school, as you're going through middle school? So you guys didn't have money. Were you a good student? Was school a focus?
No, I was never really I was like a C, B minus, C average kind of kid.
Did it just not interest you, or?
I was always into art, and the other things sort of weren't as important to me.
So when did you start to find out you had artistic ability?
When I was in the kindergarten. Actually, I can remember drawing things from a very, very young age, wanting to know how to, Mom, how do I draw this? Because both my parents were artists. But I remember one of the first things that I remember was I was going to the kindergarten assessment, and they were like, draw me a stick figure. And I drew a banana man. I drew this, full character. And they were like, wow, you're really talented, and it stuck with me, which art was always there for me, obviously before, like I said, I was trying to draw things and write and, but I was always getting in trouble in school, especially junior high. Because I wasn't a good math student. I wasn't the best speller. I wasn't terrible, but math was my absolute worst subject. And also I was ADHD, which in the 80s, it wasn't quite diagnosed like it is nowadays. I was just in trouble a lot.
Yeah.
I was always in trouble.
Were your siblings the same, or were you kind of the out?
I was kind of the black sheep, I guess.
Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. Yeah.
I'm the oldest of the three, and so it's so weird being the oldest. I don't know if either one of you.
I'm the oldest as well, yeah.
So
I'm the middle.
The oldest always seems to get the brunt of everything, and because you're the oldest, they want you to understand things that the others don't understand quite so much. So I felt like a lot of times I was the expectation for me was a lot higher. So I always felt like there was a lot more pressure, being the oldest. But yeah, I was a little bit different than both my brothers. My middle brother, he's pretty chill till you piss him off, and then he's a firecracker. And my youngest brother, he's like 3 years younger than me. We never really got along growing up. Like, it was always that big brother, little brother dynamic. And, we didn't start really getting along until we got older. But they were both, they both had their own thing, Both of them went into the military, and I didn't. My brother, my middle brother joined the military when he was a junior. So he went to boot camp, came back, finished his senior year, and then went to AIT, and then went to war, went to Iraq, Afghanistan.
So let's go into your high school years then. So you're 17. Your younger brother still would have been a 8th grade freshman when your parents divorced, somewhere around there?
I was a junior. So my middle brother was a sophomore. He's a year younger than me. And my youngest brother was in the 8th grade, I think.
So as your parents go through that divorce, you still getting into a little bit of trouble?
Yeah, I was just lucky and never got caught. A lot of my friends did. And, we lived in a small town. So trouble was always around the corner, especially for kids that are trying to be kids, It wasn't like it is now. Like, go out and party and have a good time and experiment and, try something and not have to worry about like dying because of fentanyl or something. And like, yeah, you know what? I don't really like this. I'm not going to try this anymore. You know what I mean? And nowadays, you can't do that. But yeah, definitely. I was looking over my shoulder,
That's good.
Trying not to get in trouble, but doing everything that I could
Having fun,
to get in trouble if I got caught.
So when did you start to fall in love with tattoos? Is it in high school? Like your artistic ability, I would imagine, is developing over the years. And when does tattooing, when does it first pique your interest?
And that's funny because I believe I was a freshman when I was first introduced to tattooing. My cousin was a kitchen magician.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. A garage warrior, tattoo artist who was terrible. He was just scratching everybody up, just tattooing terrible tattoos on himself. And he bought this kit from this guy who was quitting. And it was just like an old Spalding and Rogers, like the cheapest thing that you could get. But it was like everybody's starter kit. And we were riding around in his car. He had an old like 60s Barracuda, and we're riding around over in Muncie. We stop in at this tattoo shop, and we go inside, and there's nobody in there. Like, nobody. There's this dude sitting on a couch with a pad of paper just sketching. And it just seemed so lonely and boring. And, my cousin's like, where is everybody? And he's like, everybody's like, oh, they're out doing whatever, who knows? Nobody had appointments. So, like the apprentice was there holding down the fort, going to call somebody if somebody came in type deal, And I'm like, that sucks.
So not in love yet with the idea of tattooing?
No way.
Yeah. And
I was like, you suck. You're terrible. And this guy looks so lonely.
You're like, no. Were tattoos? So tattoos now are like, I mean, everyone like basically has one. Was it a big thing, or to some maybe?
When I first started, tattoos were getting really, they'd been kind of big for about 10 years. Not like mainstream. Like if you got a sleeve or something, cool. You were stared at hard. Like people were like,
yeah,
that's
we're about the same generation.
Oh my God.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, it was still a little edgy because I'm almost
early
50.
2000s, like 2003, 2004. Like people had been getting tattooed, for a long time. But the style had started to evolve from, that whole biker sailor, sort of scene to more art, and the scene was opening up to all kinds of other artists. It was evolving at that point, even before I'd started. Like, it was like the new school era, where it was kind of like the best way that I could describe it would be kind of like pop culture art, big bold lines, colorful stuff, like cartoony kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But like I said, my first introduction to it was
not great.
So connect the dots then. So did your cousin give you a tattoo? Did you let him tattoo you?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. What's your first tattoo?
No. Well, as much as I did want a tattoo, like, my parents were like, absolutely not. Super, super conservative. Like, Indiana's a Bible Belt, like, super religious. Like, I grew up super religious. Like, my name is actually Elijah, but my brother's name, this is confusing, is Elisha. So when we were growing up,
Oh, wow.
nobody could ever get Elijah and Elisha proper.
Yeah.
It was always like a mix of the two, like Elijah and Elijah, or Elisha and Elijah. Like, no, you're saying the same thing. And so my brother had red hair, my blonde hair, and so he was red and I was Sonny, and that's pretty much how it happened. Yeah, I had this nickname that I absolutely hated for the longest time, and I was like, Dad.
What was the nickname?
I'm not saying it. my wife still, years later, she still tries to get me to tell her, and I'm like, no.
Oh, your wife doesn't even know?
No.
Oh, we're not getting it for
It's
the pod.
it's one of those nicknames. It's not even that bad, honestly.
Well,
but
it's just
I've
the
kept
three
it
of
as-
us.
I've kept it as, yeah, just the three of us and the rest of the internet.
His wife will kill him. Like, you said it on the podcast.
But I was like, Dad, we got to do something about this nickname, right? I was like, is there anything you called me when I was a kid? And he was all like, well, I used to call you Sweet Pea. And I was like, no,
Yeah.
that's even worse.
Oh, my gosh.
He was like, well, I used to call you Sonny Boy. And I was like, well, we could drop the boy and I can just be Sonny. And we can spell it with an O instead of a U. So I'm like son instead of like your son instead of the son. And so that's how my nickname happened. But yeah, so like I said, back to where I got off track.
Yeah, first tattoo. Where does the first tattoo come in? Because I have a lot of questions about the whole tattoo world I want to get into.
So what actually got me interested in the tattoo world? I was in a band in high school. I believe it was my junior year. So it was just like 2 years later, or not even quite 2 years later. It was, a year and a half, something like that. And I was in this band, and it's called Dyer's Eve, and we played like covers, like.
And what were you, a singer?
I was a singer. We had dueling singers, and it was my buddy's band. And somehow I got involved in this band. I don't even remember how it happened, but ended up bringing on this guy who was a drummer, and he was a body piercer. He never pierced in a shop, but he wanted to be a body piercer for a long time. He was one of those like freak kind of guys. He wore a trench coat, dressed like Marilyn Manson, just to kind of date
early 2000s.
Yeah, just to date myself a bit. No, mid 90s.
Okay, yeah.
Is that
so,
you too?
Well,
it's bringing back some
sorry,
memories.
actually late 90s.
Did you wear
you're
that?
right.
No, but I know the time.
The goth, it was the goth kids, eye makeup, skirts, long
It was
dresses,
a weird time,
black,
Natasha.
like
It's gotten weirder, but
everybody. Well, yeah, it has, but I think I almost prefer the Marilyn Manson goth versus the new age goth. But so he was one of those scary kids that nobody really liked, but I thought he was cool.
could play the drums.
Well, I didn't even know that at first, but he had already graduated from school, and so we were hanging out, and he ended up getting me into like metal, like death metal and hardcore music and stuff. And so one day he gets this opportunity to go pierce at this shop in a little town called Marion in Indiana, and the shop was called Wishmaster. And so I started hanging out with him on the weekends. So when I wasn't at school, I would go over there, get a ride, get my parents to give me a ride, or him and his girlfriend would come and get me, and we would go hang out. And I would just hang out in the tattoo shop all weekend, just doing art. So like Friday night, Saturday night, and then you go home on Sunday, and just hanging out with all these tattoo artists and body piercers and stuff.
And then the clientele that's coming through. So,
well, yeah, but that was less of a thing for me then, like it was just kind of like being a part of a group, and one of the artists was always cool with letting me watch him tattoo. And so whenever I could, I would go in the back because it was taboo. Like if you weren't an artist, if you weren't there to get tattooed, you were not allowed in the back. You're not allowed in the room. Artists didn't want to have to be like looking over their shoulder, like, what's he doing? What are they messing with? I was still very, very cloak and dagger at that time. Not like open forums now where you can just go in and like, come on over and have a seat, hang out with your friend,
And so real quick.
So it was a privilege for me to actually be in the back and hanging out, watching them work.
And you're 17 at the time? This
Yeah.
is 17.
16,
so what?
Yeah. 16, 17. Yeah, I was 17. Yeah.
So for those that aren't familiar, because I've come to get tattoos, but I haven't hung out in the tattoo shop. And when I think back to late 90s, early 2000, my mind goes to tattoos are being done. You're partying until 4 or 5 in the morning. Like, what does this culture look like? Because from the outside, people don't know. Was it professional? They're coming in, they're tattooing, people are going home. Was it a combination of, oh yeah, there's some partying, there's some people coming in and having a good time? What does it look like?
Oh man, to a 17-year-old, women, money, drugs, a good time. Like
that's what I imagine.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's literally it, and especially then. I mean, it's a bit chill now, because it's more commercialized and it's everywhere. But it's like being a rock star, like literally, like, wow, people love you. People like
the artist, the tattoo artist.
Yeah. People just want you to do your artwork on them. Are you kidding me? Like, people want to pay me. People would want to pay me to do that. Like, no way.
Very attractive.
And then they want to pay me. They want to pay me more money than I've ever even seen. 17. You know what I mean? I worked at Subway. I and the freedom, just like not having to clock in, being able to come and go, like you said, party, get off work, party until you're exhausted or you're done, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, go to sleep, wake up, 12, 1 o'clock, go back to work, start it again. So do the whole thing over again.
So when does that decision happen? So that you're sitting there at 17, when do you decide this is what I want to do? And
like instead of college.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that's the thing. I knew I didn't want to go to college. Like I said, I was never on my grades enough to be like, oh yeah, I want to go to college. Plus, like I said, I was a poor kid. So I knew if I went to college, that was going to put my parents in debt. And I didn't want to do that. Also, I was tired of school. What am I going to do? I was one of those kids. Everybody's like, what are you going to do when you graduate? I'm like, I don't know. Even until my all the way up to my senior year. Like, what are you going to do when you graduate? I don't know.
So you hadn't started tattooing yet?
Yeah, no. I had no idea what I was going to do. Like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to be a slave. I don't want to go work at a job that I hate. Like if I'm going to do something I want to be free, and that was sort of my mentality. I knew I wanted to do something with art, whether it was music, because I was in bands, all through high school and stuff, or whether it was something like, at first I wanted to be like a cartoonist or something like that. But the thought of drawing the same images over and over and over again made me feel like I just wanted to beat my face on a table.
So you graduate high school. You graduate?
I did. I graduated.
And then, so what direction do you go? So what happens?
So this is where things get a little strange, right? So I'm hanging out at the tattoo shop on the weekends and stuff like that. And I want to learn, but I realized that it costs money for an apprenticeship. And I'm like, I don't have money. So
what does it cost? So it's for those that don't know. So you want to be an apprentice.
It just depends on your teacher. It could cost anywhere from 10 grand to, 50.
So the apprentice is paying
it
the
just
artist.
Depends. Yeah. It
To
depends
do
on the
what?
artist. So you're pretty much teaching them your entire skill set. It's a process that takes, people always want to fast track it, but it's a process that takes years. Like to properly master, and be a tattoo artist where you can just kind of go and do whatever. It takes a couple of years, and everybody always wants to like, all right, I've been doing this for a year. I'm ready to go out there and tattoo. It's like, you have tattoo artists that do that, but it's very hard.
I don't imagine if you look at their tattoos after 1 year versus 10 years, you can see the difference.
Well, yeah. And self-taught tattoo artists versus, teacher-taught tattoo artists. The success rate for for somebody trying to go through an apprenticeship is very low anyway. But you factor out a teacher, it's even lower because you're just doing all the wrong things. And you're teaching yourself all the wrong things. And
creating bad habits.
And then eventually, yeah, exactly. And then eventually, if you're going to get better or improve, you have to unteach all those bad habits. And that's hard. It's really hard to unlearn something and to, honestly, like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I've taught myself, like, set that ego aside and be like, okay, I was completely doing this wrong, So there's a whole lot that come into play with it,
And so did you get an apprentice?
I did. I had a teacher. I was hanging out at this shop, right? So let's go back just a little bit, right? I am a senior in high school, and I missed 4 days of school, and they expelled me. 6 weeks of school left, my senior year, passing all my grades, had all my credits, everything. And they expel me for this new truancy policy that they had initiated, like there was no more senior skip days. None of that stuff was happening. And there was a new new principal and vice principal, and they were putting people on the chopping block. And so I get expelled. They take it before the school board, and it takes them 2 weeks to decide whether they're going to let me come back to school or not. And so with 4 weeks left, they're like, all right, we're going to let you come back to alternative school, but we're dropping all of your grades to zeros, and we're making you pick up 2 new electives because you have a gym class and an art class. So you have to make sure you pass those too. Now, anybody that knows anything knows that nobody starts at zero. You start at a 60%, and then, you go from there, That's how the slide rule works. But they set me up for failure. And so I made it all the way. I wasn't allowed to be late. I wasn't allowed to miss a day, or I was out of this program. I was there every day, did everything, got all my credits but 2. And I had to watch my class walk. And it was the hardest day of one of the hardest days of my life that I can remember, right? And part of the reason that I decided to go back to school was because I was going to join the Army, and I was going to learn how to tattoo, and then I was going to go down range and tattoo on all my friends because I had my tattoo connection, and I had this tattoo artist, and I'm like, if I learn, if I learn how to tattoo, then I can go do this, right? And so, actually, it's the dream. The dream initially started as I was going to join the military, and then I had to get my GED or my diploma because they weren't going to give me the same benefits if I didn't. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And then I got offered the opportunity to be a tattoo artist. And I was like, okay.
You got your diploma.
Got my diploma.
Decided not to go to the Army.
Decided not to go to the Army.
What was that decision like? Why did you decide not to do that?
I got the offer to become a tattoo artist, and I was like, I'll just become a tattoo artist and then join the military after.
And so how did you get that offer? Was this from the shop that you were in?
Yeah, I'd been hanging out at the shop, and one day I was watching over the guy that I'd always watch tattoo, and he was like, hey, you want to learn how to tattoo? And I was like, I kind of looked around, like, yeah,
And is that an apprenticeship offer or is it an offer to work in the shop? How does that work?
It's an apprenticeship offer. You don't usually just go right out the gate tattooing. I was like, yeah, I'd love to learn how to tattoo, but I ain't got any money, man. And he's like, all right. He's like, no worries. We'll figure it out another way. You know, you can pay it off another way.
And how much was it? Was there a price at that point?
He never gave me a price. I knew it was expensive, but I never really actually knew how much an apprenticeship cost. My teacher was self-taught. I don't think he knew how much an apprenticeship actually cost. So there's that too. But he was like, we'll work it out another way, you know. And he pretty much was the most abusive person that I've ever met in my entire life.
To you?
To me.
Wow.
And not just to me, but just to everyone. This dude was super short, like 5 foot, maybe 5'2". So he had like super Napoleon syndrome. Plus his dad was a jerk, beat him up all the time. I don't know if he was an alcoholic, but he was a very angry person. And he always took it out on my teacher. And being conditioned, like I was talking about earlier, you know, you go back to that way you're conditioned and you treat people the way that you've been treated. And so he treated people the way that he'd been treated his entire life. And I remember the first time I knew it was going to be rough, he checked me into a wall and like it was some of that like panel board and it broke in between the 2x4s.
And you were in between it?
I was stuck. Like
This is your teacher?
my teacher. Yeah.
Oh,
And he walked
that
away.
you're paying? That
Well, I mean, I wasn't paying money, but yeah, I was paying in blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
But he walked away after he checked me into this wall, and I'm up I'm on my tiptoes because he checked me up because he's shorter than me, right?
Yeah.
So he checks me up, and I'm like on my tiptoes because I break into the wall and it grabs me. Eventually, he comes and helps me get out of the wall, pushes on the panel, and I get my arm out of there. But that was the first time that I knew that it was going to be awful.
So you're working for this guy. Have you gotten your first tattoo yet?
Yeah, I tattooed myself.
What was your first tattoo?
Gave yourself your very first tattoo?
I did. Yeah. I did this. It was it's like this little skull crest. And I just hamburgered my leg. And
Has it been covered up since?
It's kind of covered up.
Oh.
I can show you a picture of it. Or I can show you it on my leg. But we were at my teacher's house because by the time that I was able to pick up a machine, the shop that we were working at, that he was working at, was starting to close, and they were gonna change owners and all kinds of stuff. So I was at his house, and I'm sitting on a chair, and I'm just chewing my leg up, and he's just looking at tattoo magazines. Just like 2 hours later, he's like, "You should probably stop."
Oh my gosh.
And so
It was awful.
from there, when was your first tattoo on someone else?
My first tattoo on somebody else was on this woman, and it was a rose, little rose with a name. And I told her it was a bad idea to put the name in there. And she's like, "No, I love him. It's okay. We'll be together forever." 6 months later, she saw me at the gas station, and she's like, "Can you cover up this name?"
Oh my gosh.
So how old were you when you did that tattoo?
I was like 19, 20, something like that.
Still working for this guy under him?
Oh,
Learning
yeah.
From him?
Yeah, I was probably 19.
So
Something like that.
when you think back to him, what are some of the important things that he taught you about tattooing or about business?
Well, he didn't really teach me much about business, but he did teach me about cleanliness, by treating me very poorly and cussing me out and talking down to me in front of my clients as well as his clients. He taught me everything not to do, everything that I never wanted to do, Even when I had my first apprentice, I was a little bit harsh, a little hard on him because I was going from what I'd learned,
Yeah.
And now that I'm, a seasoned veteran, I realize you don't need to do that, There's really not even, there's a certain amount of hazing that comes with being an apprentice, but there's really no reason to make somebody, crawl through mud and, smack them in the face and, treat them badly. And so.
Was that the culture back then, or is that just this shop?
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about hazing culturally. Absolutely.
Within the tattoo world, like in a shop.
Everywhere. Hazing was a thing, like schools, like college, high schools, colleges. It was kind of not being as big of a thing, but the military especially. Yeah. There's a lot of hazing that happened there. Fraternities and things like that. Hazing it was like a rite of passage. And nowadays it's not so much something
it's different.
It is. You don't have to belittle and degrade someone there's a better way of breaking someone down and building them up than to treat them like less of a human than they are.
So did any of this deter you? So you decided not to go to the military. You're doing tattoos. You thought you'd go to the military later. Were you, when you did the rose tattoo for that lady, were you all in? Did you know, okay, this is going to be my career for the long haul? What was
I think I did. Once I realized that I was getting the opportunity for an apprenticeship that I didn't have to pay money for, I was very young, very naive, had no idea what was proper etiquette or anything like that, what to expect. And so my personal thought on it was, this is the way everyone's treated in the industry. This is the way apprentices are treated. I had nothing I had no contrast to compare it to. So it wasn't until I'd been his apprentice for 3 years where I realized this is wrong. There's something definitely wrong with the way that this guy's treating me. And I've talked to some artists that have had a similar experience, but more artists had a much better experience. I mean, like I said, there's a level of hazing that comes, but this dude would literally physically beat me up with fists and stuff. He wouldn't just talk me down and, make me feel this big, an inch tall with his words. He would literally physically beat me up. And I was afraid of this dude. We all have a slight rational fear of our fathers when we're growing up, right?
Yeah.
I was more scared of this guy than I was my dad. It was this dude doesn't and not only was he just this short Napoleon syndrome kind of character, he knew martial arts. So I wasn't trying to get kung fu.
So how long did you work for him before you left?
I think it was 3.5 years. We were together, and then finally he slapped me in the face one day, and that was it.
This is so wild to me.
That was my breaking point.
I have no idea how this helps you become a better tattoo artist.
It doesn't.
That's so crazy.
No, I knew more about fighting than tattooing.
You're not training to be a UFC fighter. That's
exactly.
It's very strange.
Yeah, so we ended up fighting. We ended up scrapping around the shop. I ended up getting the better part of him, he was like, you had enough? I'm like, you had enough? Because I'm, I'm 20-something years old. I'm ready to go,
Did that make
I beat on this dude's face all around the shop, and then it was the weekend was over, and I came back, and I was I'm taking over the shop, and he's like, no, you're not. And we had this big argument, and I tried to fight him again. He didn't want to fight me, and at that point, I just took my stuff and I left, and that's kind of when I went out on my own.
And how long before you came to California?
Nomaded around. I went to North Carolina in 2008, and then I believe in 15 or I think it was 2015 we left. 2015 or 2016 we came to Cali. Well, we went to Arizona first.
My
wife and my kids. We moved to Arizona. And I definitely was not a desert person. I didn't like it very much. I didn't get along with my father-in-law very well. We were staying with him. Plus, he he has pancreatic cancer, which he's still alive, still fighting today. One of the strongest people I know, I believe it's like 7 years now going on fighting pancreatic cancer. So congratulations, Conrad. Way to keep kicking it. But we were there for about 8 or 9 months, and then we decided to come to California. Got out here to Cali, and I was working at this little shop in Citrus Heights, and it was cool for a while, but it just wasn't really my style. And I started doing this project where I would paint patriotic images and things like that on American flags. And I started talking to veterans and people around the country to see, what the feedback was on that, whether or not it was going to be a good idea to do. And it brought me that much more closer to the veteran community. Now, when I was in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is the home of the 82nd Airborne, was my first real introduction to the military.
And you were tattooing.
I fell in love with, I was tattooing, and I fell in love with the 82nd Airborne. Those guys are crazy. Mm-hmm. They jump out of airplanes that there's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong with these airplanes, and they just jump out of them. They're crazy people, and I loved it. And so all my clientele were Army.
And were you right outside the base?
I was on at Fort Bragg. I was on Yadkin Road most of the time tattooing at a couple of different shops. But yeah, man, like it was, once I went to Fayetteville, it was like, this is great,
When you think about your tattoo progression, like how would you describe that and what your art is? And when you look back to when you were 19, start doing tattoos to where you're at, what does that evolution look like?
Oh man. Well, 18, 19 years old, thinking about women and money, as a man, right? Not all men, obviously, but that was my mind. I was like tattooing, like that's the quickest way to, money and women. Like I said, it was rock star, like people just wanted to hang out with you because you were a tattoo artist. It's kind of like being a pilot back in the day. Like everybody just wanted to hang out with you.
And when you look back at your work then, are you proud of that work? Or are you like, ooh, I could have done this different if I had a different teacher?
Well, everything's a learning curve. My teacher, he was terrible. After I started learning and picking up things, he stopped teaching me. So not only was he abusive, mentally and physically abusive, because he was self-taught, I think there was a bit of jealousy there. And so like once I started picking things up, he stopped teaching me. So in retrospect, had I had a teacher that taught me versus a teacher that withheld information and techniques and things from me, I probably would have learned a lot better, a lot faster, a lot more efficiently. A lot of the learning that I did was, trial and error kind of thing, meeting new artists, talking to them. So yeah, absolutely. My work back in the day, was elementary compared to now. It's grown leaps and bounds as far as consistency and, where my strengths lie. And I absolutely know what I can do and what I can't do. And if I can't do something, I'm not afraid to be like, it's not in my wheelhouse.
So what is your specialty? Someone wants to come to you. What are they coming to Sonny for?
I do a lot of realism and like color, black and gray, a lot of black and gray and like black and shade stuff. I really love new school, like that pop culture, big line, fun poppy color and things like that. But most people come to me for like realism. I do a lot of realism, a lot of American flags, nature, animals, bears, eagles,
and
things like that.
Realism just an artistic ability, or is it years of practice and refinement, or a combination of both? I'm not an artist, so I when you say real, like I couldn't draw anything that looks real.
Yeah, so realism is just doing something without an outline and creating an image that stands by itself without a big black bold outline to hold it together. Mm. And realism, is It's concentrating on shadows and contrasts and tones and values and light sources and things like that. With realism, you have to know where things go, or it doesn't, or it won't ever look real.
And how did
it's
you
a lot
get
of
there?
shapes.
Like for that
You have to
shading,
understand.
when you're looking at a tattoo, like you've tattooed me. So when you're looking at it and you're drawing it out, how do you know? Does your mind just see like I need to shade here? Is that experience, or is you just it's that artistic ability? I can't see what you see.
So it's a lot of that, like experience. First of all, I've been doing this for 22 years now, and like I said, trial and error. But you practice on different mediums: paper, painting. They have this fake skin that you can tattoo now. So it's all just about refining your skill and your craft, because nobody that ever started anything was good at it. I guarantee you, like, you didn't come out of the box doing something amazing. There are exceptions to all rules, obviously, but 98% of everyone comes out like, oh, that looks cool, I want to do that. And they're terrible at it. The difference is they keep going. That's the difference between winners and losers, success and failure, is people that continue to do and fail and do again finally end up with a winning equation or a solution that gets them success, right? Or they win. People that experience failure, loss, and they quit, they're the only ones that never get to experience the other side of that, because you can fail 100 times, but the 101st time may be the one time that you succeed, and failure's never failure if you learn from it and you continue to grow.
I absolutely agree.
That's what it's all about.
Has your art evolved? So your skill has, but the demand of people, the type of clientele, I know veterans are, obviously a big, has that changed? Like, are there certain things you say, oh, I need to learn how to do this because that's what people want? Or have you just always kind of known your lane and just gotten better at that? Let them come to you for that.
Because I come from a melting pot area, which the Midwest is sort of a bit of everything. It's a bit of West Coast, it's a bit of East Coast, and it's a bit of Midwest, North and South, right? So we kind of get a bit of everything there. So starting out there, it wasn't like a lot of, you see artists that are like one trick ponies. They do one style and one style only. I wanted to make sure that my scope was broad enough to be able to take on any tattoo that I could. So for me, for the past 22 years, and still now, I'm a student. I continue to learn. I continue to evolve. I continue to grow my skill set. If there's something that I don't have in my wheelhouse, if there's a tool that I need that I just don't have, then it's time to learn that, And I consider myself a forever student, and that keeps me hungry. It keeps me wanting to learn, And there's so many tattoo artists that you see that, at one point they were amazing, or they were really good average tattoo artists, and now they're like terrible. It's because you get to a point where you go stagnant, and then you kind of regress and you get complacent, and you're like, oh, well, this is what it is. Like, it's a way to keep me from being complacent so that I never am fully satisfied, so that I continue to grow. Because even if I'm the best artist in the shop, that doesn't mean that I got to stop. That means I just got to work harder, because I don't have somebody to help me raise my ceiling,
It's very cool. So we had a couple questions from people that listen. So one is around your clients. What's your favorite type of client that comes to you? And then what's your worst type of client that comes to you? Like, who do I not want to be coming in to say, hey, Sonny, like, can you get this tattoo done in 10 minutes today? Like, what is the profile of your favorite? And
so my favorite kind of client is a client that has an idea of what they want to do, but they're not completely married to the idea, that there's a bit of wiggle room in between so that we can work together to create something cohesive. Now, unless you just come in and your idea is just a home run. You know what I'm saying? Like a grand slam.
How often does that happen?
I'd say it's like 1-2%. Now with AI and things like that, it's a little bit more, it happens a bit more because AI kind of just pumps it out. But most of the time, I would say it's like 50 to 60% people know what they want. And then there's like 40, like there's like 60, 40 that are like, I kind of know, but I need your help. And then there are people that are so indecisive that they can't figure out what they want at all. Everybody deserves a tattoo. I just want to say that right out the gate. If you want a tattoo, you should be able to get a tattoo. But you should definitely do your homework. You should definitely have an idea of what you want. And you shouldn't be afraid to tell the artist, no, I don't want that. Because too often, people are like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then they hate the tattoo because they were afraid to tell the artist no. Yeah. So my ideal client is someone that isn't afraid to speak their mind, like, hey, I don't like this and I do like this. And like, I'm not willing to compromise on that, but they have an idea, but they also give the artist a bit of artistic freedom to create something, because sometimes an idea inside of your head sounds better in your head than it does once you flush it out and start like piecing it together.
Often.
And part of the problem and part of the reason, not really the problem, part of the reason that happens is because people don't look at artwork the same way that tattoo artists and people that art all the time look at art. Because you don't have to be an artist to be able to put something together that looks beautiful and flows and your eyes follow it the way that it's supposed to. It's much more difficult to do that when you don't have any idea of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
we talk a lot about accepting or asking for recommendations. I've tried to get better at ask the expert, right? Like, you tell me, do you have a recommendation on what type of wine or where to stay somewhere, all that good stuff. So I think with artists, my assumption would be more people are almost looking for that. It's like, hey, I have a rough idea, but you do this all day, every day. You've seen things, like you have a creative mind that can make it better. So I would assume that's kind of how it goes. We did have one other question, or at least one more. I don't know if you had more, but from Lisa. She asked, what's your favorite tattoo you've ever done?
Oh, man.
It's really hard to pick one, but
there are a lot of favorites. I would say probably one of the most, there are two that I can they really stand out in my mind. One is a memorial that I did for a Marine. His name's Chris. And I did this eagle globe and anchor. And I did the eagle and the globe. I did the eagle realistic. And then I did the globe like a metallic, looking like almost like the pin. And it's coming out of this diamond, and the eagle's wings are coming out of the diamond. So it looks 3-dimensional. So it's like part realism, part stencil. He brought me this stencil, and it was pretty much a commercial piece of art, a Marine piece of art, cross sabers, and the EGA, the Eagle Globe and Anchor, inside of this diamond. And the sabers were coming out of the diamond. And I was like, what if we did this, but we gave the eagle a realistic feel? And he was like, absolutely. And so we ended up doing around the Eagle Globe and Anchor mantling. Mantling, if you don't know what mantling is, it's what you use to build a coat of arms, like the leafy sort of stuff. It's called mantling. And then there's a bunch of banners with, I believe it was like 12 or 15 of his fellow brothers that lost their lives. So that one's probably one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites because it's so special, because it means so much to him. And he's the one that gave me the K-bar that I showed you for the 2nd Battalion 23rd Marine Group. Actually, after I did the tattoo, him and the existing members of 2nd Battalion 23rd Group pooled their money together and bought me that K-bar and put the message on there for me. He brought it to me. When he brought it to me, made me cry. Like that's how emotional it was. Like, and sometimes I feel like I'm just doing tattoos, you know, but then I get people like Chris who remind me that I'm doing much more than just tattooing. I'm giving back to these men and women on a whole nother level, that I truly believe that if I was just tattooing, I wouldn't do it anymore. I would find something else to do. I make money at it, but there has to be a purpose at a certain point in your life. There has to be something that you're living for more than just yourself and your family. Because if you have family, it's always about family, but there also has to be something else too, you know? And so I needed a cause, I needed a purpose. And that's why Kinetic Ink is such a great place.
So I'm going to pause you right there because we're at an hour. So tell us a little bit about Kinetic Ink and the veterans as we close out. So you work with the veterans. So take a few minutes to tell us about that.
The shop that I'm a part of is it's called Kinetic Ink Tattoo Company, and it's probably one of the greatest. I say probably. It's one of the greatest things that I've ever been a part of, hands down. I've worked all over this country in tattoo shops everywhere, and I've never worked in a tattoo shop like Kinetic Ink with the camaraderie and the brotherhood. It's such a special place. It's more than just a tattoo shop, which is one of our mottos that we go by. You know, we go above and beyond to take care of the active duty, the veterans and first responders that take care of our great nation and our cities and our states. And they're some of the greatest. They're some of the greatest, and they're just incredibly grateful for what we do for the veteran and first responder community. A portion of every tattoo that's done at Kinetic Ink Tattoo Company goes to support a veteran nonprofit organization that the owners of Kinetic Ink run called Warfighter Overwatch. And what that is an organization that reunites squads and units of soldiers, and they do all kinds of community outreach. They provide all kinds of help as far as like substance abuse, PTSD. They have a program that they provide working dogs for firefighters to help them after they come back from like a traumatic call and things like that. I mean, they're an amazing organization, and they're connected with Kinetic Ink. And so we work in tandem with them, and we donate funds to the men and women that fight and die and support our great country. We have an Honor the Fallen wall at Kinetic Ink that has a lot of local faces and a lot of faces from all over the place, to include the latest situation. Well, not really the latest, but the evac in Kabul 2 years ago. And all the men and women that lost their lives that day are on our wall, along with Danny's soldiers and so many others. But it's an incredible honor to have those men and women on our wall. And the men and women that serve, that come in, they love it, you know. It's a place where they can feel at home, especially police officers. You know, they're looked at very negatively, especially nowadays. And so for them to go in, try and get a tattoo somewhere, it's hard for them to be themselves because they're afraid, you know, maybe something, you know, like they're going to like mess up my tattoo or put something that I don't want in it, or I just have to completely be somebody else to get a tattoo. Well, that's not Kinetic Ink. You come into Kinetic Ink and you can be who you are. If you're a police officer, you can be proud that you're a police officer, be surrounded by, other first responders that are in the shop at the same time as you. And so that's, we offer a discount to veterans and first responders on their tattoo. We cater specifically to veterans and first responders, but not only. We tattoo on civilians as well, but we offer a discount to the veterans. And we have coin. We have like 2 flags filled with coins. We have patches from all different branches and services, from the Army, Air Force, Marines, Navy, Coast Guard.
It's incredible.
You name it, like they're over there. And then coins from every branch that you could possibly think of, including Team Rubicon. Like it's just the community that we have built at Kinetic Ink is beyond special. And I couldn't be prouder to be a part of it.
Well, it is incredible. And I appreciate you taking the time to tell us your story. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
And showing it, we'll definitely be showing pictures, but walking in the shop and seeing all of that. And I think it's cool that Anthony also got a tattoo. So I heard about it